Good morning and good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Stranded live stream, which is an extension of the Strandberg user community, and it's a way, an attempt for us to engage with you all on interesting various topics. We outlined a bunch in the beginning, and we've had a few suggestions. We've gone through everything that we set out to do, so we are looking for new formats of this. So please send your suggestions to stranded@strandbergguitars.com, and we'll try to pick you up. One guy that got in touch a while back on the first point here, a guest interview, is Kaushik. I won't attempt your last name. I'll have you say that
No worries.
soon. He said, I want to interview Plini. So, of course, we complied. Welcome. Kaushik in the middle, obviously. Plini on the left. Good afternoon and good morning to you. So, tell us Kaushik, how did this happen? What was your idea?
Yeah, so I was always intrigued by the music of Pliny and the complexities and the beauty, sheer beauty of it. So, and when I found out that Ola is doing these series, actually I dialed in for the Per Nilsson series last week or the week before, and I wondered, it would be wonderful to do the same thing, just to get kind of an inside view of Pliny's musical brain, I have to say.
Yeah.
So that's why I reached out, and we're having this.
Awesome. Well, good stuff. I am actually going to just leave you to it. And for those of you that are watching, keep your questions coming in the comment section of the video. And when Kaushik and Pliny are done, we'll take your questions. You and Pliny and I will have a chat. You and us will have a chat, and an archive of the entire video will go up on our YouTube channel. It's staying on our Facebook page, of course. So enjoy, and I'll leave you guys to it.
Thanks a bunch, Ola. So great to have this discussion. Thanks a ton, Ola, for arranging this, and it's incredible to talk to Pliny firsthand. So I guess we'll be having a lot of fun. So to start with, I first want to talk about some gear, because that's why we are having this interview in the first place. So Pliny, what made you pick up a Strandberg? So what were you playing before this, and what made you pick up?
I was like you. I used to play Ibanez. And that's because everyone that I loved when I started playing guitar played Ibanez, like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, early John Petrucci. Pretty much everyone plays Ibanez. So that's the guitar that I got, and I played it, and I loved it for, I can't remember, but long enough for it to totally like rust and corrode. So I decided that because I was still playing guitar like most days, I deserved a new guitar. And I've been looking at a bunch of different things. For a while, I wanted the John Petrucci signature. I also wanted a Parker Fly, I think just because they looked kind of interesting. And then I came across Strandberg through probably Misha Mansour or Tosin Abasi, who were playing them at the time. And I just thought that was like the coolest looking guitar I've ever seen. So I kept kind of just researching it, and I think at this point Ola had only handmade like a dozen or so, so they weren't really particularly available. But I think I signed up to the wait list anyway, and then a few months later I was in Germany on holiday, and the band Intervals were playing, and I talked to Aaron, who's the lead guitarist, a little bit before, so I went to the show to meet him in person, and he was playing Strandberg on that tour. So after the gig, I met him and played the guitar, and I was like, holy fuck, this is the lightest like guitar of all time. It's also incredibly sexy, and seems to play really well, even though I was just standing in like a dark hallway, not plugged into anything. And then I guess that made me more serious about needing to have one. And I'm kind of mixing up the order of events. But then at some point I contacted Ola to try and skip the wait list by telling him how talented and successful I am, which didn't necessarily entirely work, but he was just starting to make production 6-string models. And so I ended up, I guess maybe a few months later, I ended up getting one of them and have played them ever since. And I'm still not particularly talented or successful, but Ola hasn't figured it out.
Awesome. So how do you configure, for instance, if you look at the neck profile, that's the only thing I'm concerned about when I think about other guitars. I've never touched a Strandberg on my own because they're not available. I live in Holland, so it's nearby, but not here. So if you compare with the neck profiles of the Ibanez Prestige, just stuff like that, which is incredibly thin. So how do you think about this Endure neck of the Strandberg compared to that?
I was always a fan of the thin neck, and I still am if I'm playing like a conventional boring guitar. But when I got the first Strandberg, it only took like 5 or 10 seconds to be like, this is normal and this is incredibly comfortable and works just as sort of well. So I think once you get to try it, you might be a little bit freaked out just because it looks different, but the actual feel in your hand is probably going to be as good as or better than any guitar you're used to. And I guess that's the genius of the design, is that it does everything that a fast neck can do, but with the extra support for your hand as well.
Gotcha. Yes. Also from the performance side, probably the last question for now, then we go further into the musicality part. So I also see you endorse a lot of plugins, like from Neural DSP, you have your Archetype, and I've also seen in the last concert, which I watched at Nijmegen a couple of months back when you were here in Holland, that there was a MacBook Pro on stage and there was a Fractal X3 on stage. So I was wondering, were you kind of also using plugins live, or was it just the Fractal doing the stuff, and what is going on?
For the tour, we were using the Axis X3, and that was doing my guitar tone, Jakob's guitar tone, the stereo backing tracks, the click track, and it was all controlled by the laptop, so it was telling it when to change the sounds for both of us. And that's probably the most compact I've been able to do all those things, because it's just like a 1-3 rack unit piece of hardware. At the time, my plugin didn't have MIDI support, so you couldn't automatically change patches from a computer. But I've still been using it for the last few clinics that I've done. I used that with sort of just using the mouse to change tones. And now they've got the hardware coming out, so I'm going to definitely try and probably use that, because again, it's smaller and more powerful. And I'm just hoping that technology keeps just like doing this, where I don't have to carry anything. Maybe I should have been a DJ. But I've always used digital modelers and software for pretty much as long as I've recorded. So I've been used to how bad guitar tones used to be from software to how, to me, they're kind of almost better than real equipment now in the digital form. So I'll just keep kind of using whatever's smallest and best.
It seems like we have quite a lot of similarities. But you still don't use the plugins format lives, right? Because you still, like if you look at the Neural stuff, they have now MIDI support as well. So you can put in a MIDI controller and you can run it as a plugin host. But you don't do that live a lot?
I think by the time that playing live music is a real thing again, I probably will be doing that.
Gotcha. Okay, so going back to when you started picking up the guitar, right? Going back, I think 25 years. I don't know how long back that was. So what made you pick up the guitar? That's the first question. Then I have a ton of follow-up questions.
The first instrument I played was drums. I think that was inspired by Ringo Starr from the Beatles. So I never got good at drums, and maybe that's because my inspiration is, as they say, not even the best drummer in the Beatles. But then also drums were too loud for me to be playing where I lived. Kind of, I guess, like you, except I didn't build a glass cage for them. And then also in the house, there was a ukulele that I used to like to play to the point where I broke it. Like the whole back just came off. I don't know, maybe I was playing like punk on it or something. And then I kind of had the option, my parents gave me the option to replace it or to get a guitar. So I got a small scale classical guitar and started playing that. And at the time I was listening to, I guess I would have been about 10, so I was listening to all the stuff that a 10-year-old listens to, like Green Day and Blink-182 and all that kind of stuff, which I guess made wanting to play an electric guitar inevitable. So a couple of years into playing the acoustic, I got my first electric for my birthday, which wasn't actually an Ibanez, it was like one of the typical fake Strats. I don't remember the brand that most people start on. So I played that, started learning more like Red Hot Chili Peppers, Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, all the like classic learning guitar music, and then started getting into heavier stuff, which led me to all the like shred guys, which is how I ended up playing an Ibanez. But yeah, it was kind of just the natural, I guess it's not a natural transition from ukulele to electric guitar.
Yeah.
Just trying to play the songs that I was listening to at the time.
Gotcha. So if you look at the practice schedule, right, when you started playing the instrument, like you were up to the shred level kind of thing. So what did you practice for how long? How did you organize the stuff?
I remember when I got the first acoustic guitar, I got like an empty notation book, which I intended to learn music by like writing things down in. And I remember I wrote down the C major scale using open strings, so like that one position that you would never be able to use anywhere else because it uses open strings. And I think that's as far as I got. And then I just went straight into like trying to learn songs from guitar tabs that I found on the internet, and then from tabs in magazines, and then by ear. So for the first few years, must have been like 5 or 8 years or something like that, I was just learning guitar by learning bits and pieces of songs. I remember the first time I learnt a major scale across all 6 strings was in a Trivium song. I can't remember the name of the song, but it's got one part that's literally just the whole scale, like from the first string to the 6th string. And that was the first time I learnt the 3-note per string major scale. And since then, I've obviously used it all the time, but like that's kind of where I picked up scales and bits and pieces of theory, which is coming across them within songs. And I guess the same as technique. Like I was trying to learn metal songs that make you have to learn to palm mute properly and play pinch harmonics and all that stuff. So yeah, it was just kind of that process of figuring out how to make the sounds that I liked. And that's kind of all it's ever been. Every now and then I get fascinated by something like alternate picking or sweep picking or hybrid picking, and I'll spend like maybe half a day or less looking up any cool sort of literature online for learning that technique or patterns to practice or something like that, and I'll do it for like 10 minutes and then go back to trying to make music. So most of that stuff just comes from sitting in the back of my head, and then eventually maybe when I'm recording a song, it's like, oh, this part might sound cool if it was sweep picked, or this part might sound cool if it was alternate picked. I guess I'll practice doing that for the next hour or so just so I can record it. But that's really the only way I ever learned anything, because practicing with a metronome or kind of going through anything in a methodical way never seemed fun to me.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. I mean, it's a sharp contrast with a lot of the players who are been practicing like 16 hours a day for a few years, and so that's kind of not what you have probably been doing.
No, and that's why I don't sound like those guys, because I'm not as good.
So, what would be the most important area to focus upon? Like, as we know, like music consists of theory, technique, combination of different things. So, as I understand, you mostly learned by learning the songs, and you just picked up the technique because you wanted to articulate something. Uh, so, so if I ask you, like, where do you focus upon when you're, developing yours? One of the most important key areas.
For me now or in general?
It's to start with and also now, because I think every musician keeps on developing, and it's as long as they live, they can learn new things. So it's kind of a question through a long period of time.
Yeah, I guess there's probably more than two, but I can think of two ways that you could go about getting better at an instrument. One would be to decide that you want to be able to do a certain thing, and then you focus on what you need to do to get to that place. So, for example, I want to be able to play expressive solos like Steve Vai, but not necessarily sound just like him. So I'll learn a bunch of his songs and then learn all the different techniques involved in that and the different chords and scales and stuff to do with that, and then branch out to learning bits and pieces of other players, and then maybe decide I like Joe Satriani's tone, so I'll go into how do I get that tone, like what sort of compressor or drive pedal or whatever do I need for that. Meanwhile, I've got like Steve Vai's licks, Joe Satriani's tone, and then I want to get like John Petrucci's beard or something, so I go and research like what beard oil does he use, and obviously it's not working. But and so that's kind of what I've done, is just listening to music that I like and then figuring out what bits and pieces of that I want to be able to do myself to eventually blend into whatever I sound like or sound like myself. And then I guess the other approach would be I want to get good at guitar, but I don't necessarily know what I should learn. And then I guess you would go through and learn scales and modes and the different general techniques for playing. I guess in the sort of way that you would with a teacher or going to a school, until you find maybe you don't like certain things and you want to learn certain other things. But I guess my approach has always been to focus on what I enjoy in music, so what I enjoy hearing in other people's music, and then figuring out how to either emulate it myself or try to create something that evokes the same joy or excitement or whatever as I found in the music that I like. I can't remember the question. Hopefully that was relevant.
Yeah, I mean the most important aspects to focus on. So yeah, so you described two methodologies that you followed. Yeah, great. So going back, so we are talking already about like how you blended like the style of Vai with the tone of Satriani, and I mean just an example. But if I ask you about the general influences, what kind of music do you generally listen to, and what are the most influencing players that you have in your mind?
I think after listening to those guys, the next huge hero I have or have is Guthrie Govan. I would have gone through a period of a couple of years where my phrasing was suddenly like hugely just trying to be him, all the slides and crazy bends and stuff. And then lately, I think my biggest inspiration is a guy called Tim Miller, who's an amazing like jazz, I don't know what you call it, jazz fusion guitarist. Crazy legato and finger tone and everything. So I guess the sort of background in the like classic greatest guitarist in history, and then sort of exploring the different less mainstream, I guess, electric guitarists that are playing today have been my main influences on the instrument. But musically, in the last couple of years, I've listened to mostly like soul and electronic music and sort of singer-songwriter folk music, um, and still a bit of like Meshuga and Dillinger Escape Plan and like the heavier stuff because you have. But mostly music that's genre-wise or production-wise quite different to the sort of like progressive metal that I originally started making music because of. I guess because for example, like Dream Theater was probably the band that made me want to make my own music, followed by Periphery and Animals as Leaders. So I guess maybe like 80% of my musical journey so far has been dedicated to like getting to know those bands and figuring out how they make music and what goes into making something sound like Dream Theater or Periphery. And then now that I've sort of absorbed everything that I think I love about them, I'm looking into just all other genres to see like how can I take the production of a folk song and apply it to what I know about playing guitar and songwriting, or how can I take something from an electronic song or something like that? Because I think that's what really interests me in terms of how diverse of a palette I can draw from and still make it sound cool.
Okay. Going to that progressive metal, you talked about Meshuga and all that. That inevitably brings into mind those complex, odd meters, polyrhythms, and stuff like that. So, just curious, did you have any influences from Indian music? Like, in south of India, they have this incredible musical language called Kunakal, which is also popularized by folks like Matthias Eklund and all this stuff. So, do you have any exposure to that, or any ideas from that, or?
I have some very, very minimal exposure, and that's as far as like a couple of YouTube videos, but never really looked into it properly. And you make me remember that I probably should.
Wow, it's fascinating to hear. The next question is about, of course, your incredible music writing thing. So first thing I would like to, if you can tell us anything about, phrasing and choice of notes. What goes in your mind when you think about phrasing?
I guess it's kind of intuitive, but the intuition has come from all those years of trying to be Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Guthrie, Tim Miller. So I guess automatically if I'm about to play something, my brain is thinking, okay, here's the note that I think will work. How do I want to play that note? Based on how I feel today and maybe the context of the song, I want to play that note like Steve Vai, so I'll come into it from the whammy bar, or maybe I want to play it like Guthrie, so I'll slide into it or something like that. But I think that sort of thing exists somewhere that I haven't really analyzed because it's a little bit subconscious. But I guess it is definitely based on all those influences and what I hear as being good currently. But then, like, I'll listen back to the way that I played a few years ago and think that I was sliding too much, or I was using the whammy bar too much, or something like that. So it's constantly changing.
So a related question will be: so when you improvise and you're probably in a scale, in a mode, and you happen to, as you mentioned, like a note which looks right. You supposedly hit a note which doesn't sound so right, like a minor second or sharp fourth, or which is probably not making the most amount of sense in that musical context. How do you go about, I won't say repairing, but making it sound good? Does it happen with you, or are you at level that you never hit such notes?
I exclusively play those notes. Depending on the context, if it's live, And so I guess you would have, I think we did it on that tour. We have like a little improvised jam at the end of the set. And because it's live, I guess, as well as improvising and having fun, there's also the like necessity to play something entertaining because there are people who are paying to be entertained. So for that, if I reach for a note that is totally wrong, I'll probably play it again because it's funny and maybe pull a face or something and then fix it. And that's the sort of, I guess that's the sort of improvising where you can get away with anything you want because it's going to happen and then be gone forever. And I like those moments a lot because I think they're what can often make a live performance special and surprising. But yes, if the note doesn't work, then you're only going to be like probably one semitone away from the right note. So it's maybe a bend or a slide or something like that. And when I'm working on a solo and I reach for something that sounds horrible, I usually give it some time to see if maybe I can convince my ears to find that it's actually quite interesting. I did a guest solo for a friend of mine recently, and I can't remember the key, but let's say the bass line goes from C to C sharp, and the melody that I played on top was something like C to D. So I'm playing a D over the C sharp, which in context sounds very ugly, but I really just wanted the melody to do that, so I did it, and it sounds wrong. It definitely sounds wrong, but I kept it because I felt like I liked how the wrong choice sounded better than the correct note, because the correct note sort of felt like I was just randomly generating a solo in key. I don't know if that makes sense, but I guess the way that I've been writing music lately is if I come across something that sounds ugly, rather than try and put it back to where I think it belongs, I'll see if I can move everything else to kind of make it work, because that's how I'm sort of coming across, I guess, sounds that I haven't necessarily used before, but if I can convince myself that they sound good, then hopefully there's an audience for them too.
I mean, you remind me of Alan Holdsworth.
I wish.
I mean, he always emphasized like the root is relative, right? So, I mean, so that would make sense. Anything you want to tell us about the choice of notes? Because I was watching one of your interviews on Guitar World where you kind of explained how you pick up a standard minor pentatonic scale and just add a ninth or 11th, your trademark one of things to make it sound like your riffs are in that typical fresh, sparkly, rich, beautiful. I'm running out of adjectives, kind of things. So, can you tell us anything about that?
I guess what I'm noticing in my own guitar playing is if I stick to the scale for a chord, because the sort of patterns under my hands don't sound very exciting to me, it's going to sound quite bland. So if the chord is C major and I'm playing a C major pentatonic, it would take doing something really interesting in terms of rhythm and intervals in that scale for me to think that it was good. Whereas if I shifted this choice of pentatonic scale to like G major, where you get a D, I guess, oh no, I'm going to lose myself here with theory.
Don't worry.
Shifting the scale but playing the same sort of crummy patterns is going to sound more interesting and more surprising because it's bringing in those sort of less obvious note choices over the chord. And then again, I guess if you shifted it even further to another pentatonic scale that had less in common with C major, but still again played the same pattern, it would sound more sort of surprising. And then you can always resolve it at the end. But I guess that's sort of like the approach for me is for something to sound interesting, I don't have the luxury of being able to use techniques that sound impressive to me, but I can try and find notes that are less obvious, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean that makes me think about also your fretboard, because you don't have any markings apparently, right? So do you play a kind of blind, or like is it just your complete muscle memory that you rely on for phrasing, for instance?
Well, there's side dots, so there's no fret markers on the face of the fretboard, but there are on the side. So I do have that as a cheat sheet. And I think one of the songs that I'm recording at the moment is like one of the few songs in a very long time that I haven't played in like E, A, or D. It's kind of shifts keys. And so that's throwing me off a bit because I'm so used to using like the 12th and 10th frets for everything. But it's, as much as I wish it weren't, it is mostly muscle memory. But I guess the trick is to teach your muscles to do more things so it's less repetitive.
So that you can bring and think about the music.
Yeah.
Complex songwriting secrets. So when you listen to Handmade Cities, or those incredible compositions, how do you walk us through, if you can, the process of writing the whole through actually having an echo of myself, so probably that's resulting in this erratic speech, but sorry about that. Can you take us through that process of writing a complex song, right from the beginning to when you think it is sounding fantastic, and when you stop stop layering up?
I think at least some of the complexity comes from luck, or if not luck, then like trial and error. None of the, I guess, longer or more interesting songs that I've made were quick to make. And actually a lot of them I would have maybe 1 or 2 minutes just sitting there and I couldn't figure out what to do with it until eventually I had some sort of breakthrough which might explode it into suddenly being like 6 minutes or in a different time signature or something like that. Because I guess for some songs, or maybe not even a song that I've written yet, but if I decided I wanted to write a song, it would be relatively easy to take the structure of most songs, like pop songs, which is, I'm going to get this wrong, but let's say it's like A, B, A, B, C, B, or something like that. And then, but put it in 7/8 or something and put it in Lydian or like a mode that's less common pop. But then immediately you are making it easier on yourself because you only have to write 3 sections. And then maybe say you have a chord progression, which is the A section. Maybe the first time it's played on guitar, bass, and drums. But when it comes back, it's only on the bass and drums. But they're playing busier and the bass player is slapping and the drummer's got a bunch of little bells and stuff like that. So a lot of this time when I'm writing, I'll have some sort of idea of a section which is like 8 or 16 bars long and has a chord progression built into it. I'll mess around with how it could be arranged in terms of what the drummer's doing, what the bass player's doing, what little synth things are happening there, and then throw different ideas at it. Like I guess something that I got from Meshuga and Periphery and bands like that was overlaying like a 4/4 sort of symbol on top of a rhythmic group that's not a bar of 4. So I guess if you wrote a riff in, say, like 27/8 or something like that, maybe the first time you play it as though it's in 27/8, which should maybe be like a bar of 12 and a bar of 15 or something like that. But then when you bring it back, you play it with the drummer playing over it with that 4/4 groove. So you've taken the same idea, which is going to feel like it's part of the song, but given it a different treatment in terms of the groove. And that's something that I do a lot. Like most, maybe not most, but a lot of songs that I've written, if they're in an odd time signature, there'll be at least one part where the odd time has something else overlaid on top of it. Because I guess you get the familiarity of the pattern of notes, but with a different groove. And that sort of starts to build complexity into it automatically, especially if you're programming drums. You don't even need to figure out how to do it. You just kind of
Exactly.
press the button. What was the question again?
So, you were explaining, so a complex songwriting secrets. So, what goes on from the thought process to how to execute it, how do you spread it out, and when does it finish?
Yeah. So say we're doing something like that has like this odd time signature or whatever, and it's got a couple of different variations of how that's done. There is some sort of luck or trial and error in figuring out which idea is going to feel good coming after the previous idea, and that's sort of how the arrangement starts to form. So if it's going to be a longer song, maybe it's like a one idea that's been treated in 5 different ways, one after the other, like sort of mixing and matching different parts. And then it needs to transition into a different section for a few minutes, and then maybe come back to something that's similar to the first section as a sort of finale. I guess I like to simplify, if it's a longer song, simplify it into like a beginning and a middle and an end, even if there's like 8,000 different things happening in each part, sort of just zooming out and seeing it like, here's the spacious section, here's the sad section, here's the happy section. And that makes it sort of clearer where to leave certain things out or add certain things in. Like if you're in the part that you want to be angry and crazy, but you have this variation of the chords that's really pretty and played on a harp or something, you might think, oh, maybe I shouldn't use that here because it's not saying like what I want the big picture to say, sort of thing. But it is really a lot of trial and error, and also borrowing arrangement and structure ideas from other bands. Like Dream Theater, huge influence for structuring a long song, because they tend to do it in sort of breaking it up into those chunks. I guess sort of like classical music, but less strictly. Yeah.
Okay. So when you start writing, like you pick up your guitar, work on a riff, or do you write the drum track first, or the bass first, or the keys? Like, I can imagine it varies per song, but do you have a general approach for that?
Yeah, it depends on the song. It's usually on guitar, and it usually is a tiny bit of a riff or a chord progression or something like that, or at least enough to start programming drums to it and then have an idea of the groove, and then going from there. And that's totally like, I don't know how that happens. I think that's kind of the result of making sure you give yourself time to do it. Because I know it can be frustrating to play guitar for 10 hours and come up with nothing useful. But I guess that 10 hours might be necessary to get you to wherever that idea is hiding in like the 37th hour or something like that.
Gotcha.
And I was actually thinking this today. I would like to at some point give myself like 10 free days in a row and allot like 4 hours per day to come up with something in that 4 hours. And just see what happens, because I haven't really done that in a long time. I sort of just play guitar whenever I can, and at the moment I've had a bunch of ideas that I've been working on for an album for a couple of years, so I haven't given myself that much time to come up with new ideas, but I kind of like to do it structured like that and see how efficient I am and see what's possible.
So key thing, what I understand, is having a relaxed, free, and completely open mind, right? To come up with new ideas, or
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that I'm incredibly unproductive if I have anything else sort of due or any pressure. And I find even like in the um, like the scheme of 24 hours, if I start thinking about something unrelated to making a song, that will ruin my ability to make the song for the rest of the day because I'll just be sort of trapped in that world. So actually, I found this whole like lockdown situation really nice um, in just a selfish way because it's made me have the same sort of lifestyle I had when I first started making music, which is I'm literally just in my bedroom with no obligations and can freely create. And that's something I was trying to do before anyway, like deliberately ignoring stuff for a few days at a time. Yeah, but that works for me. But I guess some people are good at, like, I know people that write music on tour, which seems insane to me.
um, going back to sorry, the last question on that was, when do you think a song is finished? Because I think that's a challenge as well when you have so many ideas, so many layering going on and complexities. So when do you think that, okay, this is enough, I stop it here?
Um, yeah, I guess that's kind of an intuition thing too that gets better and better the more music you make and the more music you listen to and think about what may have been the process behind that song being finished. I was listening to, there's a podcast called Song Exploder that's really cool, where they interview artists about the process of writing a certain song. I was listening to one with this singer called Clairo today, and it's sort of like a folky, sort of sad song that she was talking about the process of, and it only has one chord progression in the whole song. And I think she said something about how she felt bad about that, sort of, because it's like it hadn't done enough things, but the producer she was working with really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was thinking about that because there's a song that I'm working on at the moment too, where one of the questions I have with it is, do I want to introduce a section with a different chord progression? Because at the moment it's the same thing the whole way. And that was kind of like a nice reassurance that doing nothing could be could express something interesting as much as doing lots of things.
Yeah.
In the past, I've usually overwritten, like the craziest songs that I've written have even more stuff that ended up getting taken out because it sounded cool but didn't do anything to sort of service the song. Yeah, so I guess for me now it's like figuring out what the song what I want it to feel like, and figure out what it has to do in order to feel like that. Like if it wants to feel like a big emotional journey, but it's only 2 minutes and it's the same chord progression, then that's not going to do it. It's going to need to go to other places dynamically and harmonically and stuff. But if it wants to feel like maybe it's just one feeling that's being explored and maybe you'd never come to a conclusion about it, but it's just like thinking about it, then maybe it is the same thing repeated so that it sort of goes nowhere but in a enjoyable way.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So now, taking this complex, imagine that you have written this incredible song, I mean, which of course done tons of times, and you want to perform it live. As a musician myself, I've had a lot of challenge, trying to replicate that accuracy, perfection, and the intricacies live. It of course depends on your band and the level of the players, and of course, and there's no questions about in your case. But do you see a different approach when trying it live? Do you want to rearrange it, or do you have a different approach when you write a song compared to trying to recreate it live?
It depends on the song. Mostly the live version ends up being pretty close to the studio version, but it'll get simplified as far as, I mean, the drummer's going to have to play whatever the fuck he played on the record, which I guess is his problem, and I trust him to do it. And same for the bass player. And then guitar sort of gets split up and simplified into 2 parts at a time for the most part. There are some small occasions where some guitar ends up in a backing track, but usually it's just rearranged to fit on 2 guitars. And then there are some parts where if on the recording the section was arranged around a riff, so the riff is really like the special part of that song, but maybe it has like 100 other layers to make it sound cooler. But maybe for live, because the riff is the point, we can strip away everything and just play the riff like 4 people playing a riff. So usually for the heavier sort of lower tuned stuff, that gets simplified and the backing track doesn't really matter. But then we still do use backing tracks with a lot of the synth stuff. I would like to have a live player for eventually, but it's not really cost effective at the moment. But not too much changes. And then also trying to find space for improvisation.
Yep. So when you talk about the backing track, so what happens if something goes out of sync? Like, we are playing it live and then mistakes still can happen. We are all humans at the end. So how do you make it up? Or does it never happen?
It's happened a few times. One of the worst times it happened was the drummer hit the USB cable out of the laptop accidentally, or maybe he sort of got pulled out.
Okay.
Which stopped the patch changes on the Axe effects on a clean patch, which was like 8 bars in the middle of a heavy song. So we played the rest of the song with no tracks and no click, but on 2 clean guitars, bass and drums. And just kind of laughed about it because it was very silly. There was another show, we were playing a festival in Barcelona that was really hot in the sun in the middle of the day. And I think that was why that the computer started sort of skipping. So we played this intro, which doesn't have any backing tracks, but there's still a click going. But then the backing track came in sort of just totally randomly, like 1.5 beats early. And we all just like looked around like, what the fuck? And I think what happened in that case is we kept playing and we were all just like, what the fuck is happening? Because it's in our ear mix and none of us could do anything about it. But our front of house guy had turned the backing track down out the front. So it would have sounded fine. It would have been missing a little bit of information, but it would have sounded all right. And you just have 4 very confused people on stage. I think they're the only 2 bad times it's really happened. And that's kind of just, that's it. I mean, a more professional band would have a second laptop. I forget the thing, but you have them set up, and if one fails, it automatically goes to the other. And that's what pretty much every professional band does, but I don't. Because I guess at this point and at this level, like the venues we play and the shows we play, stuff like that is more likely than not just going to add to the fun of it, because worst case we still can play the songs and it's just going to be on a hilarious tone that we'll have to kind of wrestle with.
Yeah, it's a new mix kind of thing.
Yeah.
So which DAW do you use? Like, do you use a DAW for these back changes and playing the backing tracks, or what do you use there?
Yeah, it's all Logic. I record in Logic and do the live sessions in it as well.
Okay, also the patch changes on live shows, all of that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Okay, so before Ola kicks me out, one last
I was going to
question.
say last question.
Yes. Training programs. I know you're doing Petrucci's Guitar Universe, but that's only for a select few people who can go there. So anything online or any masterclass or anything that you're thinking about?
A couple of the masterclasses that I've done, I think, are on YouTube now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, there's one. I did one at Berkeley in the States. I I was flying from Canada to Boston the morning of the clinic that I was doing, and the flight was delayed. And I guess it's totally my fault because I booked the flight, but I ended up being like half an hour late. So there's a live stream of this event which was automatically recorded from the time it was meant to start. And so there's just half an hour of an empty chair and total silence. And then I arrive and start setting everything up, and I'm like, oh, sorry. And then it starts. But that was really fun. I've thought about doing something, but I'm not sure if yet there is anything that I have a particularly unique approach to that I can explain. I guess if anyone's curious about the way I write music, I have guitar tabs, so you can sort of analyze it yourself to see how things are arranged on the guitar. I would like to do more stuff in terms of explaining production ideas and layering. Yeah, maybe I'll do something like that. But that's always sort of lower on the to-do list than making music.
Yeah, can imagine. Awesome. Thanks a bunch, Plini. It was really enlightening being able to talk to you firsthand, and it's an incredible experience.
Thank you. Thanks, man.
And thank you, Kaushik, for facilitating this interview with Plini also. And for those of you that are watching, Kaushik sent an email to Stranded at Strandberg Guitars and suggested this. So you can do the same. You can also get in touch and suggest new types of formats for this stream that we can do. And we'll keep doing interesting stuff and improve and evolve. But let me try and drop Kaushik then. And then you and I can have a chat, Plini.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Bye.
nice to meet you.
That worked. I hadn't prepared this scene with the two of us in advance. But sometimes technology does what you hope that it will.
Yeah.
So I guess you've almost answered some of the questions that I had in mind, but I wanted to ask in terms of the album you're writing now, did you go into this with some ideas of directions that you wanted to evolve, like consciously, or do you think that you're approaching this with just a natural evolution of your artistry?
I guess it's a bit of both. Like there's some stuff that as much as I would like to ignore it, I probably can't ignore. Like, hey, I want to impress everyone with my guitar playing, better play some cool licks. But I do my best to try and make sure that it happens at a moment that is necessary in the song. Hopefully, I don't know. There are certain... I'm not sure. I guess I started coming up with ideas for no real reason other than I like making music, and then noticed that some of these ideas were doing things that I haven't done before, like using synths more or using certain time signatures or atmospheres or something like that. And then because I liked the ideas, I kept working on them until I had 8 that I really liked, and I was like, oh, okay, this will be the album. Now I need to figure out how to make them as good as possible. So I guess in a way it was sort of natural to get started, like just figuring out what do I have to say, and then once I had some ideas, it's the how do I say it as interestingly and expressively as possible. I think because of the music that I listen to and like, it's not going to be too weird or different to what I've written before. I mean, I've listened to like more sort of dance electronic music in the last couple of years than ever before, but I wouldn't program a dance beat and be like, oh, that sounds cool. It would still have to have some Meshuga in it or some like Pat Metheny or something like that. So there's bits of the stuff that's different creeping into it, but I can't help but still sound like someone who's spent 10 years trying to be Dream Theater. But I'm trying to keep it as see what happens as possible and not worry about how different it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, because we share music and tip each other off for records, so I kind of follow at least part of what you listen to, and it's interesting and fascinating to follow, because it's widely different from the music that you play. But I totally get what you're after. It's like more the feel and the production can bring a lot to what you're doing rather than like the music style.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we have some viewer questions. Claudio says, any chance of a collaboration with Paul Masvidal or Yvette Young?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd love to do something with either of them. We have never discussed it, but if either of them hear this, we should do it. And if they don't hear this, I'll probably contact them. Yeah, I'm a big fan of both of them. That'd be sick.
That'd be a blast for sure. Miguel asks thoughts on placing the guitar in more of an orchestra context composition.
I would love to do it. I guess there are lots of examples, like Steve Vai and Ingve have done it, and Dream Theater have done it. And I forget what it's called properly. I think it's the Metropole Orchestra, and I think they're from the Netherlands. That Snarky Puppy has worked with, and a lot of like Jacob Collier and a lot of that sort of modern jazz world. I think his name's Jules Buckley that arranges and conducts them. And I'm sure there's heaps of people that are really good, but he's the one that I've listened to a bit. Has a really good way of blending non-orchestral instruments into the arrangements. I already use a lot of that stuff in my music, so it'd be great to work with someone who knows how to do it properly. Because I guess people like him are kind of showing that anything can work with anything if you work on it enough.
Yeah, I'm not an expert. I haven't listened to a lot of this. I just know some of the orchestra, where there's a like a rock player performing with an orchestra. I just feel like the soul of rock or blues or whatever is more the tension in time, if you will, or syncopes, etc. And that can be lost if there's an orchestra that needs to be conducted, and like everyone has to play on time. Like the swing feeling gets lost, and all they can do is like play louder or softer.
Yeah, there's a lot of like orchestras playing with metal bands or with guitarists or whatever that either maybe not enough time was put into rehearsing it or not enough thought was put into doing it in a way that would appeal to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily work, but then there's also a lot of orchestra in music that I really like, where I guess the band or whoever it is and the orchestra have enough in common to make it work. Like the string arrangements on some of the Beatles stuff that's more like psychedelic. And then a lot of the stuff Steven Wilson's done that's like kind of my inspiration for using those sounds. I think it doesn't really work to like give a guitar tab to an orchestra and think that it'll sound bigger.
Yeah. Well, few more questions. Roman says, would you say the new album is close to the vibe of Birds Surfers in terms of sound, or this project was just different?
There's some bits of that stuff in there, but no, not really. Those two songs were just like fun things to make,
Oh.
but all programmed instruments except the guitar, and deliberately short and kind of weird. Whereas the album stuff is all like live drums, live bass, um, lots of guitar, lots of the same or similar textures and sounds because that's the stuff that I like at the moment. But I'm definitely not making an ambient album.
Jacob says, "What's your favorite Meshuga album?"
All of them.
Yeah.
I usually listen to nothing if I can't, as in nothing the album, if I can't pick one at the time. But yeah, that band is the best.
Yeah, agreed.
What's your favorite?
The first, like the album, the first ever Meshuga album I listened to was my brain's not working right now.
Chaosphere.
It'll come to me. It's
okay.
No, it's gonna. I'll let it process in my brain, and we'll continue talking. Would you ever do a collab with Owain? Says Christian.
Yes, Elaine, let me do it.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, I think that's. I owe him a tour. I've asked him to come on tour with me a few times, and then either like I asked him in a sort of unofficial way to see if he was interested, and then ended up taking someone else, or he couldn't do it, and it's just been really bad luck on our friendship. But yeah, I'm sure that'll happen.
Yeah, very cool. Robert says, "Do you reamp when recording?"
I didn't used to. I used to just record the Axis Effects signal, but now I'm recording everything as a DI, and Simon, my bass player, who's also mixing my stuff now, will reamp it.
Mm-hmm. So Kevin asks, how does your writing and production work with Simon, etc.? Are they involved early in the writing process or just for studio work?
The process has been, and I guess it's pretty much the same now. I write a song I work on a song to the point where I think it's pretty much finished, and then I've been sending a demo with and without my programmed drums to Chris, who's playing drums on them, and he'll work on the drum ideas, which so far have been a little bit different to what I programmed in a good way, because he's an incredible drummer and I am not. And so far there haven't been any structural changes to the songs, but I also sort of say if there's any other feedback you have for me, feel free. I think in the past there have been some little things that have changed as a result of a drummer or other instruments input. Simon probably won't hear any of it till we get in a studio to record drums, and I think he likes it that way, so he can just focus on engineering the drums as an instrument. But then he'll take it and pretty much have to do the entire thing. So he'll mix the drums, then he has to write bass lines if I haven't already written them, record them, and then mix the entire thing while I'm just kind of messaging him every 5 minutes, is it done yet? But I guess I present a more or less completed thing and then ask for their amazing touch to be added.
Very cool. So this is interesting. Do you think studying music college helped in your songwriting? Because you didn't really study in music college.
Yeah.
But let me ask you differently. Do you think studying architecture has like impacted your music in any way?
I think I was saying this last week. This is one of those things where I've said it so much I don't remember if it's true or not. But I like to think that the way that you might structure a building or a room is similar to a song in terms of you want everything in it to be there for a reason, and you want the way that you travel through it or the way that you listen to it to flow in a certain way. Um, and I guess because I studied architecture, everything that I saw was the best of the best. Like through history, I guess it's the same as listening to the most, well, not always, but the most popular artists of music ever are all pretty good. So I was exposed to really good architecture, which made me think about any sort of creative thing as that's what you aspire to. So I listened to a lot of shit music, but I haven't seen much shit architecture.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my goals with music are similar to what I would have had in architecture, which is to make something that sort of is as interesting and unique as what I liked. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask a question of my own in terms of, I mean, under normal circumstances, you're on the road most of the year, living out a suitcase kind of thing. You have your home base, but I mean, just looking at your backdrop, it's pretty like sparse. So, do you consider yourself a minimalist in terms of like worldly possessions?
Um, Not necessarily, but I guess I'm trying more and more to have less stuff because I think about traveling all the time. Um, I mean, ideally, it would be great if everything that I ever needed would fit in a suitcase, which it won't.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's definitely a goal because I think so much of the stuff that brings me pleasure is not doesn't need to be kept in a physical format. Like music is now streaming, making music is digital, food comes and goes, and that's the stuff that I really like. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not really intentional, but I guess I feel like it makes life easier to not have as much stuff. And I think you're the same.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm conflicted sometimes because there's part of me that want stuff, but I not I try to think of it more of as like I guess an evolvement of minimalism is essentialism. So I mean, if you need stuff, make sure you really need it. Make sure it like
Yeah.
brings you something, and it's not just a whim, and it's not something that is just meant to like fulfill some other hole in your soul or
Yeah.
whatever. But I guess yeah. So conscious consumption and think think it through.
Yeah.
If you need to
I
get
guess,
stuff, get stuff that lasts and
yeah.
that you will actually use and doesn't because stuff if you need to like maintain it or you get a guilty conscience of over not using it, then it's gonna yeah it's no good.
Yeah. I guess that's like why I got a Strambo because I guess my Ivan has got rusty and I didn't think, okay, now I should get a new one, a Strat, a Les Paul, and like
Mm.
three other guitars. I was just like, what's the new one guitar that I can play for another 8 years or something like that? Um, and like I start to feel weird if I accumulate too many Strandbergs.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so I don't want them, but I do want them.
yeah,
But yeah, so then it gets into kind of, it becomes an expensive interest if, even though you don't want many things, when you want one of them, you want it to be the best and the prettiest,
yeah, yeah.
as you probably know with bikes.
Yes. Yeah, I only own one. Well, I guess I technically I own two, but I one for practicality in the States and one here, and
Yeah.
I've sold my other bikes. So yeah, and I've consciously resist the urge to look at other bikes. Um, we're kind of running over, but let's take just a couple more questions. Mark says, are the tones for the new album going to be done completely on the Plini plugins? So the archetype Plini from my brain's not working today. Tell us.
Yeah, I think pretty much, because they're the best. It's the best plugin of all time. There'll probably be some parts that aren't that, because Simon owns a lot of cool amps now. He just found I forget what, it might be Boss, might be Yamaha, I don't remember. He found this old amp on the side of the road that was in perfect working condition and gets that really cool, like sparkly 80s clean sound. So maybe we'll use some of that stuff for the fun of it. But I imagine that the general rhythm and lead tones will all come from the plugin, because it's kind of like you turn it on and it sounds like what I want it to sound like.
Yeah, the way it should be. I mean, the signature plugin kind of thing, and it should be what you use. We have a question about your the new signature guitar. So Mark says, when will the Plini Signature 2 be out? There was a Plini neck through some time back. Any update? So I guess the update for me is that obviously throughout the pandemic, we're working through all kinds of logistical, just global challenges of part supply, etc. That's kind of thrown spanners in the works for production-wise. There's also this global shortage of swamp ash material. So it's been slower than we had probably intended. But I guess you can give us some feedback, Plini, on your latest and, I believe, last sample.
And so I think it's perfect. So I just need the pickups, and I don't know if it's basically we're waiting for pickups that look different.
Because you have the pickups sounding the way they are supposed to sound. So we're just waiting for one with your your logo on them.
There's a pandemic going on, but I need a little crescent moon to be happy. That's kind of sad. But yeah, that's it. The guitar's great. I mean, I played the last iteration for the entire last tour, and it was amazing, super comfortable. Yeah.
And it's basically your current signature model, but neck through, and with our new developed pickups with a twist in the bridge pickup, which is been designed and voiced by yourselves.
Yeah,
that'll be fun for sure to get that out. Can't believe how dark it's getting in your end of the world.
Yeah, it's amazing the sun sets.
It is fascinating how we can do these things. Just how the world is getting smaller.
I also don't feel like there are other people watching.
Yeah.
I keep reminding myself not to say anything that might be secret. Because this is going to live on the internet forever. It
will, for sure. Yeah, and on that note, I think we should probably wrap up. And on that note, this stream itself, it'll obviously stay on the Facebook page, but it's also going up on our YouTube channel. We have a playlist there of all the 10 live streams to date, and we'll continue populating. But yeah, awesome to catch up and hang out for a bit. So to everyone that's watching, thank you very much for tuning in. Keep sending suggestions to stranded@strandbergguitars.com for future live stream formats and new guests of the show. And we look forward to seeing you soon again. Cheers.
Bye.